Welcome to Raging Bullets, a DC Comics fan podcast, episode 374. Welcome to Raging Bullets. I'm Sean Whelan, Dr. Norge. I'm joined as always by my co-host Jim. I'm the show's own private Sybil. So says the sensei of the whatnot, Segulin, and the Duke of You Know.
How's it going, eh?
If anyone knows the story of Sybil, it'll become really apparent as to why we brought this up. We had a wonderful opportunity. Jim and I are doing back-to-back recordings tonight, and we were joined by, from Action Labs, a longtime friend of the show, Chad Ciccone, and he came on to talk about his book, Fracture. So in the first of our two recordings, we are going to be joined by Chad as we talk about his book, Fracture. So, Jim, let's get right into the episode. We are proud members of the Comics Podcast Network and the League of Comic Book Podcasts. Sponsoring this episode is longtime sponsor DCBService.com. Over at DCBService.com, on this episode, we're talking to longtime friend Chad Ciccone about his book, Fracture. It's $2.99 regularly, 30% off, only $2.09. And if you choose publishers and take a look at Action Lab Entertainment, they have a great variety of books, including one of my favorites, Pirate Eye. Pirate Eye is $9.99 regularly, 45% off, only $5.49. So they have wonderful product over at Action Labs, and I'm really enjoying it. So it's a great opportunity for you to explore it. If you have a Comixology account, their books are available on Comixology, and make sure to link that digital account to your DCB service account, because 5% of those purchases goes towards your DCB service order. That's a great way to earn money on purchases you're already making. I want to thank DCBService.com for continuing to sponsor our show. And InStockTrades.com also has Action Lab trades for sale, including Fracture's Trade Paperback Volume 1. It's $9.99 regularly, only $7.49 over at InStockTrades.com. And if you do a search for Action Lab, you'll actually take a look and see that they have a wide variety of product available there as well. So it's a great opportunity to catch up on what's going on at Action Lab Entertainment. And I want to thank InStockTrades.com also for sponsoring our show. James, what kind of a podcast are we?
Pop culture and whatnot, a division of Raging Bullets, is a spoiler podcast. We will go in depth into Action Lab's Fracture comic. So please check the show notes on the subject matter. This way we can all enjoy the show.
And actually, if you haven't had a chance, if you go to, in our show notes, you'll see Action Lab's website. We're going to be talking about the first 3 issues of Fracture from Action Labs. There's 2 volumes of it. The second volume is currently being published. So we figured it'd be great to have Chad on and talk spoilery about the first volume, because we're both big fans of the book. So you can pick that up right from Comixology. You can pick it up from Action Lab's website. So if you haven't picked up the book, great opportunity to pick it up and read it to follow along with us on the show. Or if you're on the fence still, listen to our conversation and hear why you should be reading this book. Let's talk Fracture.
Carter Hall, scientific genius from a far-off world, flies into action as Hawkman.
We are very lucky on this episode to be joined by a longtime friend, Chad Ciccone. And Chad, I know you from so many conventions. We've gotten to know each other over the years from that end. It's great to finally have you on the show to talk about a piece of your work like Fracture, something that's very near and dear to me. And Jim and I were just actually, before you logged on, having a great talk about how excited we were to talk to you about the work that's Fracture. So welcome to the show.
Well, thanks for having me. I was trying to think of how long it's been since I was on. I was on once before when you came down to Pittsburgh and did an episode at the Gypsy Cafe. But that has to be 3-4 years ago. Easily.
So, I mean, it's to be able to talk on this level about your work is something I'm really excited about. It's been too long, and I'm really glad to have you on, so thank you.
Thank you.
Now, Chad, what I'd like to, as we get started, Fracture, I know it came about from a Kickstarter campaign, correct?
Yes.
With Fracture, how did you guys come up with this? You and Sean, I know, worked together on development. Where did this story come from? And did you guys always envision it as one 3-issue miniseries or multiple miniseries? How did that genesis come about?
Well, I can't take any credit for the original genesis of the story. I have done all the character designs and all the visual work on it, but Sean Gabrin came to me with the story pretty fully formed, and the plan all along was to do it as a series of miniseries, and I believe Sean has at least 5 or 6 miniseries worth of plotting.
Nice.
I don't know if he has it on paper or in his head. We're just finishing the second story arc, if you will. But he has at least 5 or 6 already planned. Sean and I had worked together a little bit before. We're with Action Lab now, but prior to that, and Sean still actually has a little company called Angry Gnome that he did primarily horror comics through. And I had worked on a couple of, he would do these books called, I think he called them gory stories, 2-pagers, and he just sort of would trawl the internet for artists, and he scooped me up, and I had done a couple of these little 2-pagers for him, and we happened to be located not too far from each other, so we actually met in person at a couple of the Pittsburgh shows, and one day he just kind of asked me if I might be interested in working on something with him that was a little different than his typical superhero work that he had been writing for years at the time, or excuse me, horror work that he had been writing for years at the time, something more in kind of it was a dark comedy in the superhero world, and we started talking about it, and he was sharing the story with me, and I told him I'd be interested in working on it with him, and we started doing character design work, and this was right around the same time as Sean and I were both talking with some of our other friends that we knew to form Action Lab Comics. That's the publisher of Fracture. And sort of Fracture and Action Lab Comics were born together. Fracture wasn't the first Action Lab book, but it was the first book that was in the direct market, in the Diamond catalog for Action Lab. And the Kickstarter kind of launched not only Fracture, but Action Lab itself, as we were sort of just getting rolling at that time. So we had a lot of help on the Kickstarter for Fracture from Sean Pryor and others who were part of the formation of Action Lab.
One of the cool things I really loved about the Action Lab site, especially at the beginning, and I still love about it today, but it felt very underground because you could do digital downloads that were like PDF files at first, and it's evolved into, and you could buy the paper comics from there as well. It felt like you were a part of a community from that end, if that makes sense. Like like as fans, we got a chance to be a part of that as well. As you discovered, like Action Labs is there. Oh wow, cool! I can get that immediate end of it. Which I'm a big fan of legal digital downloads for that reason. As a fan, you can get that immediacy of, wow, I'm interested in this book, I want to read it now, and you can get that immediacy. I'm a big fan of comic book paper product as well, but I've actually bought Fracture multiple times. Because I
keep doing that.
I have the PDF version, but I really like the Comixology app on my iPad.
Oh,
so
I do too.
I rebought. I'm like, oh, they've got the bundle here of, you can do for $1.99. I can get like all of Fracture Volume 1, and oh look, they've got Volume 2 on here, issue 1 and 2.
The first 2 parts of Volume 2 are up on Comixology right now, and we hope we still have that community feel at Action Lab, because that's very much where we started from. We literally were a community of independent comic book producers who kind of banded together to try to bootstrap ourselves up to the next level of quality and the next level of distribution. And our books are now, available in Diamond and in comic shops and Comixology and a lot of other digital platforms. So we hope there's still that immediacy there and keeping the same feel, only increasing the scale.
One of the things that I'm going to limit a lot of, if it's okay, I kind of want to talk a little spoilery about the first volume of Fracture.
Okay,
just because I don't want to spoil Volume 2 because it's currently ongoing. But I think this is a great way to tease what's so great about Fracture, because the multiple personality disorder aspect of the story I find really engaging, because our main character is not really the superhero in the story. He's the street level alter ego that you normally see in the background when you're following the hero.
Right,
this guy's in the foreground. We're following him, and he's discovering, partway along, wait, I'm a villain. and not just any villain. I'm one of the worst villains around. And he knows it before his villain side knows. I love that hook of the story. It's funny. I'm saying that now like it's the big reveal. There's this series continually in both volumes, and I'm not going to say anything about how the second volume continues that kind of concept, but this series has a great way of continually surprising you because we're traveling with the main character. As he's discovering things about himself, we're discovering them as well. His blackouts come at a time where he wakes up and he's like, what just happened to me? Discovering journals from his alter egos and discovering what they do and don't know about each other has been something that I've really enjoyed about this ride because I love superhero comics. I love comics in general. But when creators find a clever way to tell me a superhero story that is fresh and different, but has all of the elements of what I love about great superhero comics, that's where there's magic. That's one of the things I love about Fracture. I've never read a superhero story like this. Has all the elements that I really love about great superhero tales, but the twists and turns that go on in this book is what keeps coming me back for more. And it's the way that whole multiple personality thing is handled because we're traveling with the alter ego. He feels like a guy you can hang with. That's what I love.
Well, that's part of the fun of the particularly the first volume of watching as our main protagonist Jeff slowly comes to the realization of what's happening to him and overcomes his bewilderment to try to take some control of the situation. He comes to learn relatively early in the first series that this situation creates a significant danger to himself as his personalities are at odds with one another and plotting against one another. And so he can't just sort of close his eyes and remain passive or pretend it's not happening because it's going to come to a head if he doesn't take some steps to extricate himself. So he has to try to intervene. He's trying to piece together how to do that, and he doesn't have a lot of data on his situation. So it's an interesting unfolding in the first volume, and it does continue in the second volume as well.
Yeah, we see in the second volume, it's not easy being green.
No, it ain't.
Yeah, I got to tell you, man, this was... Going into it, I knew the basic plot of that it's the split personality between the two, but even knowing that, you still have plenty of really cool swerves and just how he approaches, how he handles it. And you get some really fun moments, but you get some really cool superhero moments. I still chuckle that when he when he's flying as Virtue and all of a sudden he's flying and then he's him midair. He's like, I can't fly. Wait, no, I changed my mind. I can't fly. And he's trying to just convince himself that he can fly so he doesn't crash through the building. I laughed out loud.
One of my favorite single pages in the entire first 3-volume series to draw, where the Jeff personality kind of wakes up in the superhero. And if I'm not mistaken, that may be the first time he finds himself in the superhero identity.
It is.
Because I think, as I recall, he discovers the villain identity first. And the first time he sort of comes to consciousness in the superhero identity, he's, 1,000 feet above the ground, flying heroically above the city, and suddenly realizes he doesn't know how to fly. And that illustrates the comedic aspects of the book. It's not... Certainly with the subject matter of multiple personality disorder, which is potentially a real devastating condition that exists in the world, we could have gone, or Sean could have gone very, very dark with the book. But I think by design, he kept it more on a dark comedic level. So there are a number of sort of comedic beats and funny beats, and we strive to keep it not on a real dark psychological level. It could have gone down a really rabbit hole and been a Vertigo style real dark book, but we didn't go that direction.
What I love about it is that even though there's those comedic elements, you get to the balance is what I love about the book. My favorite comics have a balance where you've got the humor, but you've got a great, rich story that's being told there as well. That's balanced with some moments that do get dark, but then they have consequences where you still are endeared to the character. The same sequence we're talking about when he starts seeing the woman who's in trouble. And's like, okay, I'm dressed up like a hero. I know who this hero is. I have his powers. If I can just channel that, I can save her. But he also, because he's so inexperienced, doesn't have the ability to hold back, doesn't really realize the full extent of what he's doing. He goes off too much to the point where the person he's rescuing recognizes, even though he's dressed the way he is and the powers are in play, he is not who he's saying he is. And I loved that moment because it's a very serious show of, it is really, when you get right down to it, he's Jeff, he's Malice, he's Virtue. He's all of these people because of the fractured personality. They're all him, really. But their identities are so definitively separated from each other that they become three different people. I loved the bit where the girl recognized that he wasn't who he said he was, even though...
And runs away screaming.
Yeah, just great stuff.
Well, I will share that theme is continued and extended in Volume 2, and we do get some further exploration of the ability of Jeff to control the power sets as opposed to the ability of the quote-unquote fractures to do so. And there are some situations where those differences come into play.
One of the things that I really liked in the choices in the book is we get to see him in various different roles of his personality. We get to see him as Malice, being a part of the villains group. We get to see him as Virtue, seeing him with his family life, which I think is something that's really an interesting, like, all of a sudden Jeff realizes, I've got a family. I've got a wife and a kid.
Well, Virtue does anyway.
Yeah. Well, but see, that's the tricky, heady part of all this that I really love. You're right. It's so distinctive that it isn't Jeff's family in Just My, but it is Jeff's because Virtue is Jeff.
Right.
I love that part of it where, you know, on a very deep level, you can realize that it really is all the same guy. But yet, it's very easy for us as readers to separate the personalities. And I want to compliment you on this. The mannerism change where he goes from being Jeff to being Virtue in that sequence. There's a 3-panel sequence where, look, Lucas, Daddy's home. And you see the reaction on, like, something happens to Jeff, and he goes, grabs his head. Mm-hmm. The facial expression that changes, it's a slight... You can look at earlier on the page to see the Jeff version of Jeff and the Virtue version of Jeff. There's distinct differences. It's clear it's the same guy, but the mannerism change. There's a confidence that's showing in the face of Virtue there that wasn't the same as the way Jeff carried himself. I applaud you on that because it was something I noticed right away that's very hard to do because you're just doing it on a face in a page where you're seeing the other version of the character, and I loved how that looked because I was just like, man, dude rocked that because, you know, sure we could get it from the dialogue balloon. We didn't need to. You did it in the face as well. I thought it was a great marriage of dialogue and art there, and you did a really great job with that.
Well, thank you. That was obviously one of the trickier parts of the book, and that also continues in Volume 2 as kind of distinguishing between the two versions of our character. And you know, we could have done something cheesy like change the part of his hair, but we tried to carry it off with the facial expressions, and we did bolster it with, you know, some dialogue bubbles to try to make it a little more obvious, but that was intentional.
I applaud you, though, for not going the route of deliberately changing the hair part or things like that in those sequences. Malice, you know, we get the hair color change and stuff like that in a way that it makes sense because that's Malice and that's his whole MO. Mm-hmm. I really appreciated the fact that that doesn't make sense for that to happen with Virtue. And there was something about that I really know. I'm sure that took an extra amount of time to do it. But for me as the reader, it added a sense of immersion into the story that I just love. So I just wanted to point it out. One little tiny panel, but it just, because of the way the other panels fed into it, I just thought it was just a brilliant moment.
Well, it's nice to hear that it worked.
Yeah, I liked the one sequence with his buddy where he puts on the Malice costume and just how that everything played out throughout that. Because, again, that same popping in and out of when he went from being Jeff to Virtue to Malice back to Jeff, and just how the flip-flopping through that. Again, that was another really neat artistic moments accentuating the story element.
Thank you. And again, that was tricky and all by design to try to show that was kind of one of the more climactic scenes where Jeff was spinning out of control a little bit. He had sort of lost control of what was going on, and the high emotion of seeing his best buddy try to horn in on the action a little bit, and encountering this scenario where he needed to try to rescue these people as the superhero. He wasn't sure how to control the powers. And then the superhero manifested itself, and then he found himself as the villain in the hero's costume. That was sort of where things were spinning out of control.
Yeah, and even just it was funny with the little swerves that came throughout that, because the way that whole sequence ends with his buddy, with Territon remembering what Territon wanted. And I got to tell you, I didn't even remotely see that coming. So again, it was a really cool story element. It had me laughing, but it was kind of, oh crud, what's going to happen to that guy now? Because, he was doing a jerk move, but in a way you kind of understood what he was doing. I sympathized with him, and I felt for him, but I was like, oh my God, that is really cool how it came about.
I still don't know if Sean has future plans for Kyle to reappear in the series.
I kind of hope so, because when I started looking at this, I was thinking, that I kind of had more of the, with all the different personalities I go through, I would have been, Jeff with the different things. But seeing how his best buddy got pulled into the coat, I'm thinking, okay, no, that's me. Sean is Jeff. I'm Kyle. So as a personal thing, I hope he comes back.
Well, he wasn't in a particularly good situation when we last saw Kyle at the end of Volume 1. But he was not dead.
Right.
One of the things that I really liked in issue 2, there was the page where Jeff is sitting there. This is an invasion of your mind, at this point. Sure. You don't feel like and it's funny how when the book can get lighthearted at times, it deals with some very serious issues in a way that I think were one of the best things about comics when art imitates life is sometimes you learn things where I liked Jeff so much at this point that I felt for him. I'm like sitting here like, dude has this issue where moments of his life are gone and he doesn't know what's happened. There's a violation of it. At any point in time, that violation could completely destroy his life. And that can be with either personality.
That's right.
But he sits there in that moment, and because he's had this opportunity to see the family that Virtue has, he says to himself, wait a minute, okay, this guy's a hero. Okay, take that out of it. He's got a family, a wife, and a kid. How can I take that away from him? The selflessness of Jeff in that moment, I'm sitting here like, wow, this dude's really heroic, because I don't know in that moment where I've got a series of pills in front of me where I know if I take these, I can have full control of my life back. At least that's what he's assuming at that moment. This is going to give me full control of my life back if I do that. I can't do it. He's got a family. That's something I love in that moment that I'm sitting here, I'm like, wow, the hero of my story right here is neither of the costume characters. It's this guy. I knew it in issue 1, but issue 2, for some reason, it was that pivotal moment of him sitting there on that couch, pondering that, looking at it, holding it in his hand. How easy it would be in that moment for him to just take the pill and do that. And he just doesn't do it in that moment. I know eventually he makes the decision to do it, and I totally get why. But I loved in that moment he wrestled with it where other people wouldn't do it in a million years. They'd be like, hey, I'm Jeff. This is my life. Sorry.
Well, you have to remember, theoretically anyway, whatever the quote-unquote fractures are, the hero, the villain, Jeff was the base. There was a time before this occurred, or at least Jeff believes there was. Mm-hmm. So whatever exists in those fractures is a part of Jeff. So whatever heroic aspects Virtue has, Jeff has them too. They're all parts of the same guy.
I got to remember not to get on Jeff's bad side.
No.
because this is where that sequence goes, where we see him with Malice and waking up. I loved that because it was like literally, that would not lead to a moment where he'd wake up as Virtue.
Yeah.
And that's the thing that I really loved about the story, because in isolation, it's funny how I've gone back through and I've read this, and I've done it where I've just read the Virtue pieces. I've done it where I've just read the Malice pieces, specifically just because I wanted to see, even though we pop in and out, if I could follow a story thread with them. And you can.
Each character has a narrative. That's right.
They do. And I that was the part that I thought was really great as well. Is it hard for you as an artist to keep a consistency through the different personalities?
It is. That's one of the most difficult things for me personally, and I think other artists struggle with this as well, is just maintaining visual continuity. And particularly in this story, where there's some pretty subtle changes between one character and another, since they're inhabiting the same body. Putting that across on the page over the course of issues, and I happen to be an artist who's pretty slow, so these issues take me longer than some others. So we're talking a period of months that I'm drawing, page 1 of issue 1 versus page 13 of issue 3. So that is a challenge, and I think I will say from volume 1 to volume 2, since we're now 3 years later in terms of my progress as an artist, I think I carry that off a little better in volume 2 or in the second book than I even did in volume 1. And we did pretty well in volume 1, but I think volume 2 looks a little better, and that continuity is even stronger, and the character development is better.
So you knew when you got involved in the beginning that this was going to be a series of mini-series.
I knew that Sean had plots for that. I mean, obviously there's business concerns as to whether we would ever be in a position to produce those, in terms of how many they sold, and whether Action Lab got on its feet as a going concern, and whether Action Lab would be there the next year to publish a volume 2, and if not, whether we'd have an outlet for it. But I knew from the beginning that Sean had multiple volumes plotted, so that if the opportunity was there, the story had the length to continue.
There's a very greedy part of me that's glad to hear that, because I'm enjoying the characters so much that remember when I first read I was really glad the way the first miniseries ended. I'm not really gonna I won't say how it ends, just because it ends on such a cool cliffhanger. I'll say that it ends in a cliffhanger just because I liked that. Because at the end I felt myself wanting more when I saw it was a 3-issue series.
Well, volume 2 starts a moment later.
Right, and I loved that aspect of it, because when you pick it up, it's your questions are like start getting answered right away.
Oh, yeah.
And that's something that I like about the series is it's serialized storytelling. I want to know more about this character. I want to see how his life evolves, where he goes from here. It's clear that this issue is going to be a part of him, and that's something that I've really enjoyed about the story is the immediacy. Especially nowadays, with the market being so dominated by your more identifiable characters, the ones that have been around for a long time as being everyone's favorite characters, it's hard to get a character on the market that people get attached to. And I found Jeff immediately likable. Like, I wanted to know more about him. I wanted to follow him, which is critical, I think, for a series. And for anybody that hasn't tried it out, you can get it on Comixology for $1.99, the whole series, which, I mean, for a jump-on point, that's insane.
I think you can get issue 1 for free.
Yeah, I mean...
The first 3 issues is $1.99, but you can sample issue 1 for nothing.
But I would honestly tell people, don't... Just get the whole series, because you honestly... rereading it in preparation for our conversation here, and knowing as I'm reading, I'm like, there's things I'm going to want to say that I'm definitely going to need to say, and I'm going to limit myself to being able to say it about the first volume, because I really want people to pick up the second volume as well. But knowing that I wanted to talk about this so deeply, I reread the whole thing And it reads so great together, especially to be able to read the first 3 issues of Volume 1 and then jump into the first 2 issues of Volume 2. I'm like, oh, this is a sweet read. And there's Volume 2, I will tease this. You have this cool jam piece in there that's in the Volume 2 Comixology. As I was zipping through, it's our lead character and Molly Danger, which I thought was really cool as well.
Well, I got a big kick out of that because that was drawn by Jamal Igle. And to see, for my money, one of the top artists in comics today drawing my character design was a very proud moment for me. And, that put a smile on my face when I saw that cover. It was a bit of turnabout because when we first... as I said, Sean and I are involved with Action Lab, so when I first saw that we were going to be publishing Molly Danger, I did a little Molly Danger pinup just to throw up on Facebook and give to Jamal. So to have him then draw Virtue as a variant cover for issue 1 was a big thrill for me.
I'm a huge fan of that in comics. I love seeing... to me, it's really important. You're my artist for Fracture, and I love seeing... the way that you and Dave do your work together on this series, it just looks fantastic. I mean, it's a visually very pleasing book. I love, though, when you get the opportunity to see other artists tackle, like you said, the variant covers, or sometimes they'll do those jam pieces at the end of a comic where you get to see other artists' take on that. I like that kind of stuff as additional bonuses for the fans because you want, it's great when you have the opportunity. We don't always get this. The opportunity to have the same writing and art team on a book, because there becomes kind of a artistic culture to the book, a style that matches it. I'm a huge fan of that. There's something about a mood and tone that's set because of it. But to have those little extra bonuses of being able to take a look at what another artist would do, I geek out at that stuff all the time. That piece was important.
Let me tease you for the entirety of Volume 2, which is a 4-issue series this time instead of a 3-issue series. We have Jamal, the variant cover for issue 1. We actually don't have a variant for issue 2. We have 2 variants for issue 3. One is Action Lab in February, or maybe it's March, I'm not sure. We're doing Ugly Love Month, which is John Super Ugly Williams, who's an amazing artist located out in California. He's a rap musician, and he's got a really great style. He's doing covers for 6 or 7 different Action Lab books and variant covers that we're releasing all in the same month. We're calling it Ugly Love Month. Nice. And he did a variant for Fracture, which I love. And Bill Blankenship, who is, for Volume 2, there is a different color artist. Bill Blankenship has taken over for Dave DeWanch, who's completely busy as working on some other books as well as being the creative director for Action Lab. So nice. He just wasn't able to continue doing the colors. But Bill is just as good, if not better, in a very different style than Dave, so I think it even enhances the art more. I don't know if you've seen the first parts of Volume 2, but
absolutely,
we're thrilled to have Bill on board. But he did a variant. He's also an exceptional artist in his own right, and he did a variant cover for issue 3. And then Steve Bryant did a variant for us for issue 4. I'm
a huge fan. When you just said that, I have the geeky smile on my face. Huge fan of Athena Voltaire. So yeah. I'm like, yay!
Steve has a couple of the villains on his cover.
That's awesome.
Cool. Normally with me, when I do my read-throughs, because I do multiple read-throughs, and I'll sit there and I do the regular read, and then I go back and I do an artistic read where I'm just looking at the images, and then I do a couple just in-depth, reads, and just go back and just kind of move through. It was weird with Volume 2. I did something different. My first read through on issue number 1, issue number 2 was a pure art read. And I literally, because I picked up both issues, digitally. I went from one to the other, and I was just doing an art, read through. It wasn't, focusing on words, but I was just focusing on the images. And I got to tell you, the visual story element of this was an absolute really cool flow through that when I did go back and I did reread the words, and I did actually, ingest the whole the whole story being told, I had a solid understanding of what was happening, just visual, just from the what you were giving. So I got to tell you, you guys are meshing wonderfully with art and the written form.
Well, thank you. That's, again, great to hear. My goal is to, each issue I do, be able to see an improvement in my art. I am, I'll pull back the curtain. I'm not a full-time artist. I work during the day, and I'm doing my art in the evenings. So I'm still growing and maturing and hopefully improving as an artist. And between Volume 1 and Volume 2, I've had another year and a half, 2 years of work. I've done a lot of, other work in the middle, a lot of sketch card work. So I have, probably a couple thousand hours of time spent at the drawing board between Volume 1 and Volume 2. So I think Volume 2 artistically is a step forward in terms of my storytelling. I'm not where I want to be yet. I want to, I want to be as good as Jamal Igle. But I think if you hold Volume 2 up next to Volume 1, you will see an improvement. It's the same style, the same sort of continuity, the same characters, but the storytelling, I think, is better in Volume 2 and Volume 1. The staging, the panel layouts, the backgrounds, simple stuff, perspective, anatomy, all that stuff. I think I've taken a step forward. I hope I have.
My favorite artists do that, though. And, I mean, here's the thing. You're going to hit a point. I don't think you're ever going to hit that point where you're satisfied, only because I think one of the things that I like when I'm hearing you talk like this, I'm like, this is the same conversation that I hear either in people that we've had the good fortune to interview on our show, like yourself, or people that I've read interviews from or heard interviews from on other podcasts. It's my favorite artists are the ones where they're trying something new. They're pushing themselves in this direction. They're trying to evolve continually their art to just tweak and fix some nuances that are things that we as readers may not notice as, they as an artist consider these things flaws, if that makes sense. Mm-hmm. But we as readers are like, I'm really enjoying this guy's work. And wow, look, and we do notice what you're talking about, the evolution, because it's clear if you read Volume 2, wow, the art's growing. But yet there's those identifiable qualities that make it your artwork that are present there. But Jamal's a great example of that. My first exposure to Jamal was when he was on Firestorm. And from that, I became a fan very, very quickly of his art style. But if you take a look at his artwork from Firestorm straight on through to Supergirl, then on to the stuff he's doing on Molly Danger. I mean, that's not a guy who's treading water and just kind of like content to just do the same kind of artwork that he's always done. You can tell when you open up start looking at Molly Danger, that Molly Danger's got that kind of this is his baby. He's pushing himself. He wants to take it to the next level. And
you can feel the love on every page of Molly Danger, in my view.
And that's something that I noticed from you as an artist. You can see it very clearly in Fracture, and I think that's neat. I mean, for us as readers, I think it's something that there's a community aspect to comics in general now, and I'm going across from big companies to smaller companies to whatever. I think there's a community culture now because of the internet. We always talk about how bad the internet is and things like that. I think this is a strength of the internet for comics now. When it's done positively, the community aspect of comics where we can follow creators on Facebook and Twitter. We can get to know jam pieces you've done. Like you said, I threw out this piece, Molly Danger, for Jamal when he was doing that. And now he's done this piece for me. You start to notice interactions between artists and things.
Well, I would not have a quote-unquote career, such as it is in the comics industry, without that community. Because my origin of being an artist who draws comic books arises from interactions on message boards and art communities. When I started in 2006 wanting to actually draw comic books. I've always been a doodler and an artist, quote unquote, just in spare time, and drew stuff. And it wasn't until 2006 that I sort of said, I want to draw comic books. And, I had never taken art classes or had any formal art education. So my tutor was the internet. And my first critics and mentors were all, people on message boards. I went to, there's a group of artists called 10 Ton Studios that includes an artist like Koi Pham, Riley Brown, and some others. A lot of guys working in comics now, and they ran a weekly sketch contest. And the cool thing about it for me was they would pick a subject. Everybody would post up a picture on their message board, and all the artists would come in and critique everybody else's picture. So this was a free way for me to participate in this contest and get professional working comic book artists to critique a piece I did every week. So I participated in that contest for a year and a half, just drawing a pinup of the subject. And, I had 3-4 professional comic book artists critiquing me every week, and I would suck that stuff up and try to improve. And the first actual comic book work I did spun out of the Comic Geek Speak message boards, where I just posted a post up to say, hey, I'm a aspiring comic artist. Are there any writers out there that have a 3 or 4 page script that I could practice on? And Blue Meanie from the UK posted up a script, and that turned into the first published thing I ever did, which was called Baby Boomers.
I remember that.
It was like spy versus spy with babies. And that all, the first 3-page one of those was just something we did for a lark and put up on the message boards, and people were like, hey, this is funny, this is neat, keep doing it. And then I was like, well, you want to do some more scripts, Rich? What do you think? And so we did some more scripts, and, suddenly we had 20 pages of the stuff, and we're like, you want to try to put out an issue? And he had some friends over there with Orangutan Comics, and it kind of snowballed from there. So my entire work in comics arose from these communities and the interaction over the internet. Action Lab wouldn't exist if not for these internet connections and communities. That's how we got to know all the guys we're working with, all the people we're working with Action Lab right now.
I remember at convention picking up Baby Boomers from you, but also picking up the art cards that you would do, where you would do
the sketch cards.
Yeah, the sketch cards, the character cards. I loved that because you had such a wide variety of them that as a fan you just kind of sort through. And first of all, it was a treat to be able to look through what you'd done, but then finding like favorite characters in there and seeing your take on them was it was a joy. That's the part of cons that I really love. There's so much to like about conventions.
Well, Sean, it's very funny to me that I've done much more sketch card work than I have actually done comic book work, and the two fandoms for those two things have an overlap. But there's a lot of people who are just into sketch cards. I've probably done 35 or 40 different professional sketch card sets in between doing my comic book work. It's I'll do 40, 30 cards for. I just in the last year got my foot in the door and got picked to do some Marvel and DC sets for the trading card companies that put out. They'll put out 3 or 4 different Marvel or DC sets a year. I'm just finishing up a set for a company called Rittenhouse Archives. It's called Marvel Unlimited. I did a Women of DC set a few months ago. I've done Tarzan. I've done a couple years ago I did a whole set with all the Moonstone characters. And a lot of people who know about my comic book work, they don't know anything about all this sketch card work. And a lot of the people who collect the sketch cards don't even know I'm a comic book artist. But I go to shows and I put my comic book stuff out, and I always put out the sketch cards. And it's interesting to kind of see that overlap. And when people come up and look at stuff at the table, I'm always is this a sketch card fan or a comic fan? But there's a whole community out there for sketch cards too, a collector community just like there is for comics, a whole group of websites devoted to sketch card collecting and original art card collecting. It's an interesting, different yet similar fandom and market.
I'll admit to being completely clueless about that. I ended up picking the sketch cards up only because I was talking to you. You had them there, and I was looking through them, and I really enjoyed the artwork. So I was like, not being aware that there was a culture to it, and I think that's I think that's fantastic, because to me it's I think anything that is bringing a new community into the comic book realm. You know, I mean, obviously, I love the fact that it's its own culture, too. But I think, as fans, comic fans naturally love swag. Mm-hmm. I mean, that's kind of that's part of our culture, in the sense that if you like an artist, you'll tend to pick up things of theirs because you like them anyway. But the idea that there might be a doorway for some people that are into the sketch card culture, that they might go, oh, you know what, I really like this guy's art. Maybe I'll try some of his comic book work or something like that.
Well, there is a lot of overlap between the sketch card artist community and comic art, and a lot of the most popular trading card and sketch card sets are the comic book character-based sets, the Marvel sets and the DC sets and the other sets that the bigger companies put out. So there's a big feeding in both directions, I think, between those two collectors and fans bases.
Do you have like a dream project that you want to do? Like that thing that you've with Fracture coming to life, I'm like sitting here like, wow, this is I'm excited for you, because I just think it's an amazing product to be out there. I mean, this is a story that I know as a fan I'm going to read over and over again. It's a go-to story for me. It's one of the reasons when I purchase something more than once, that's a sign that it's something special to me. The fact that I'm bothering to purchase it again, it's because I know I'm going to want to keep rereading it, because the characters and the art and everything just matters to me about it. Is there like this dream project that's on your plate that you're like, I really want to do this, or are you just enjoying the experience of where you're at now, or how does that work for you?
That answer has changed and evolved over time, because, a few years ago I'd have said, oh, wow, to work on a Spider-Man or a Justice League or whatever. But I must tell you, as I have become more involved in the comics world and working in comics, I have gravitated more towards the independent stuff, the Saga and Lock and Key, and that type of thing. So, and plus, I'm at an age where I ain't going to break in and be the next flavor of the month at Marvel, even if my art does get a lot better than it is now. So I'm just trying to find, I've got a couple ideas that I'm toying with for things I might be interested in writing, and I'm looking for what my next project is going to be. So I don't have some dream book that I'm targeting to get on, some book that exists. I'm looking to find another independent project that I can work on that will be something intriguing. I don't know if I want to do something else that's involving capes and superheroes, or something more set in a more realistic world or a more fantasy science fiction world. I'm really trying to take a deep breath after I actually have on my table right now the last 3 pages of inking for Fracture Volume 2, Issue 4. So I'm a few days from finishing all of my work on the second volume of Fracture, and there will probably be some time, if we get the opportunity to do Fracture Volume 3, there will be some time in between. So I'm just trying to take a breath and figure out what my next project is. I was just mentioning I have a sketch card set that I'm going to go into, and I actually got some interesting work from an old high school friend who wants me to do some work on. He has a business doing refurbishing pinball machines, and he wanted me to do some graphic work on a pinball machine for him. So I have some projects lined up for as soon as I finish Fracture, but I don't know what my next comic project is going to be, and I don't know what I want it to be.
That's probably a great position to be in the sense that, when the project presents itself, you'll know it. It's kind of better than...
I will.
Yeah. Well, it was like Fracture. It was probably one of those things where an opportunity presented itself, and you saw the book, and you're kind of like, "Woof, this is a cool project to be involved with." So I'm hoping it's another quote unquote Fracture for you, in a selfish way for me as a fan.
Well, I tell you, I'm getting so into this universe. I'm hoping we can get other stories from within this universe, just other heroes, especially some of those villains. You've got that society out there and you've got just the look. I'm looking at some of these other, in their meetings, and a couple of the
I will
villains.
tell you that one page in Volume 1 where Jeff awoke in the middle as Malice in the middle of the Society of Thorns is what the villain group is called. Sean let me just kind of riff on that page. There were 2, 3, 4 of those villains that he had. This person needs to be there, this person needs to be there, this person needs to be there, who may have roles in some of the later stories. But we needed kind of a crowded room, and he said, the others just, make them up. And so I just kind of went nuts, and then Sean and I just kind of jokingly riffed on the names. I mean, we've got... we put in one of the back matters, one of those old photos with, or a reproduction of that with numbers on all the silhouettes, and then put names for all of them. If you remember, in one of the back matters for that book, and we had some fun. We had Evil Jesus, and I think there was Buckethead and Wife of Buckethead or something like that. I don't remember all the names, but there was some things that we thought were funny anyway.
You know what I love about that? That's when you do that kind of stuff. That's another way that you connect with your fan community, because you're having fun with the readers that love details and love to go and see, I'm a big fan of those things. Where
Sean and I are discussing right now. We have some pages in the available to us that have been made available to us in issue 4 of Volume 2 that we can put some additional back matter material in, and we're talking right now about whether it's going to be sketches or some prose or what it's going to be.
I can't wait to see, because I'm a big fan of that kind of stuff. Because I personally look at that as they're kind of a love letter to your fans, so to speak. And I know it's kind of a trite thing to say, but I know I appreciate that, because I know those are things that take extra time for the creative team to put those things together. But for us, when we're kind of wow, that's kind of a cool way of just giving us a high five, hey, we got here.
Volume 1, it was kind of a perfect opportunity, because Sean used the gimmick of having Jeff, as you mentioned earlier, discover these journals in his own apartment that were written by Malice, and then later he finds one that was written by Virtue. So it's a way for him to kind of tap into these other personalities and what's going on. And so we used the opportunity that some of the back matter for Volume 1 was actually text from these journals that enabled Sean primarily to flesh out the backstory, side story, if you will, of the quote-unquote fracture personalities. I don't know that we're going to do more of the journal pages for Volume 2, because I'm trying to remember. I don't think the journals play as big a role. Well, they are in Volume 2 as well. I think there's one point in Volume 2 where Jeff uses them as a communication method to send messages to the fractures.
And I thought that was a cool little usage of it. Again, he's it's the improvise, adapt, overcome. It's that real world type quality.
I'm trying to remember if that was late in Volume 1 or if that was in Volume 2, but that was a clever plot device that Sean came up with.
Yeah, that was in Volume 1 that he used it. And I thought that was a cool way to go with it. I'm looking at the issue right now and I see Evil Jesus. And and to be honest, when I first read this, I was focusing on the lower level people, and I really didn't focus too heavy on that upper tier. But as soon as you said Evil Jesus, I got to look and see it. Oh, there he is. Okay.
Well, I got to have a little fun in Volume 2 as well, because there is a scene in, I think it's issue 1 of Volume 2. I don't know if you've seen the Comixology releases, because issue 1 of Volume 2, we had a little delay at the printer. It was supposed to be out right around this time last week, but our printer somehow didn't get it on the schedule, so it's going to be, I think, January 8th is when issue 1 is going to be coming out. But the Comixology 2 parts of issue 1 are out already, and there's a page in there where we see another meeting of the Society of Thorns, and I got to do a little riffing again with a bunch of characters in the background, and I'll share a little personal item. One of the reasons early on that I got into being an artist is, I'll date myself. I came up in the 70s and 80s as a child and a teenager, and I'm a role player. I did Dungeons and Dragons and every role playing game that came down the pike. And a group of old high school and college friends and I used to play a game that at the time was called DC Heroes. You guys being DC fans, I don't know if you've ever heard or experienced that game, but it was a superhero based role playing game. The license went back and forth. A later version came out. It was called Blood of Heroes, but it was basically a superhero role playing game. And I had some old high school and college friends of mine who played an ongoing game of this DC Heroes with the same group of characters for 20 plus years. We started in 1986, and we played a lot over the summers when we had college jobs, and we would get together every couple of years and play for a few months. And one of the ways I got better at art was I was always the guy who drew the character sketches. I drew everybody's characters, and then I would draw these fake comic book covers for our characters. So when I was drawing this scene for issue 1 of Fracture Volume 2, in the background I snuck in a bunch of mine and my friends' old characters from our DC Heroes days from 1986. So there's a special little Easter egg just for a few of my old high school and college friends in Fracture Volume 2, Issue 1.
I love that you're secretly Mr. Green. I was looking through the end of the new issues, and when it comes to the bottom, it showed the whole Action Labs team. At the bottom, it says that you're secretly Mr. Green. Everybody else got their role.
That's a running joke between Dave DeWanch and I. I am one of the founders and one of the owners of Action Lab. But in my day job, I'm a lawyer, so I've done some of the contracts and things for Action Lab. But other than that, I'm the quote secretary of the company, but I don't have a defined title other than that. I'm not the creative director or the business director. So when Dave wanted to insert my name in the masthead that he puts in for all the issues of Action Lab, creative director, et cetera, he wanted to include my name, but I didn't have a specific title. So the running joke is in each book he comes up with another joke to put next to my name. So in some of the Princeless books, I'm Pretty Little Princess. Hang on a second, my son just came in. Time for bed, Henry. Night night. But if you look in each of the Action Lab books, my name is there with some other ridiculous and quasi-insulting title.
I love Action Lab. I mean, funny thing is, Kickstarter for me is something that I came to the dance a little late on. But since I've been enjoying, like Action Lab's had the mature titles launch recently through Kickstarter.
Our Danger Zone, yeah.
Yeah. I really am loving, we were talking about the community aspect earlier of Kickstarter for that type of thing. Because you can follow people and see what they're following. That's how I found out about that. Just from people I was following, I'm like, oh, wait, Action Labs, I'm reading books from Action Labs right now. I think that aspect is a really cool part about Kickstarter, the internet comic community, and all that kind of stuff, because I feel like when we like projects, we have the opportunity to get involved with like helping them get a start, and then there's a different type of connection to the projects and to the people behind the projects because of it. I'm a big fan of community-based funding to get things kicked off now, and I admit I'm very late to the dance on it. It's only been the last couple of years that I've been doing it.
Kickstarter's been good to Action Lab. We've done 2 kind of as a company, and I know some of we publish mostly creator-owned books, and some of the creators of Action Lab books have done their own Kickstarters. Like Jamal Igle did a Kickstarter for Molly, which other than us publishing the book, we weren't directly involved with. But at the time we did the original Kickstarter for Fracture, it was still relatively unknown. This was 2010, 2011. Steve Bryant, the aforementioned Steve Bryant, had done a Kickstarter, and that's kind of where we all heard about it, because he successfully funded, I think it was something for Voltaire. And isn't this interesting? And so we used it at the time, and that was helpful in getting us off the ground. And then when we wanted to launch the Danger Zone line, we figured, well, let's try that again. Danger Zone, in case you don't know the background of that was brought about because over the last couple of years we had some success in bringing out some titles that are very positive all ages books. And we didn't want to necessarily become pigeonholed as a company that just does all ages books. We still wanted to be able to play in the adult playground, if you will. Mm-hmm. But we wanted to be able to say, look, a book with an Action Lab logo is safe for kids or anybody. So we needed to create a separate imprint where we could kind of go crazy with whatever mature content we want to put out as well. So we created the Danger Zone for that purpose.
And I love that. I love that idea because, first of all, it shows expansion of the company, which I'm a fan of because I think the product that is being put out by Action Lab is great, and especially the more I'm getting into it. But again, Kickstarter is great because for us as fans, you guys have to put together this really cool proposal, and we get to get an idea of what this is all about, and then jump on board and follow it after the fact. I just think it's a great aspect. I ended up the Steve Bryant's Athena Voltaire was actually the first Kickstarter I ever was a part of, mm-hmm. and because I was a huge fan of his work. But at the time, I was such a newbie to it that I didn't know how to follow people, or I literally just because I was a fan of that. Okay, I jumped on board, and then. My second one was a decent amount of time. I missed Fracture, and I was kicking myself when I realized afterwards that you had been involved in a Kickstarter. Because I've known you and loved your work from seeing you at cons, Baby Boomers, and stuff like that, and obviously the sketch cards as well. That I'm like, I would have so jumped on board this had I known.
Well, we made it despite your indifference. Thank you very much.
I got the advantage of, because of the fact that I found out after the fact, I got to read Fracture completely.
You got to read it all in one chunk.
Yeah, which was from a fan standpoint, who was like kicking himself after. It was one of those things where after I'm read it, I'm like, wait, this was a Kickstarter and I missed this? How could I have missed being involved in this one? It was one of the reasons.
You did miss out on. We did a special Kickstarter cover.
I know.
I probably didn't get that.
I did not get that, which I'm jealous of, insanely jealous of. But
you can't get them now.
Well, that's one of the great things about Kickstarter, though, actually what you're mentioning. And I encourage fans, when you see Kickstarters for people that you know and love their work, to jump in on the Kickstarter campaign, because there is that special aspect of, hey, I was here for the ground floor launch. So I get to have a keepsake that's something unique to that experience. And that, I think, is really great. It goes back to the swag thing we were talking about earlier. It builds this sense of, I get this unique collectible that, to me, I've become a big fan of. I don't collect comics anymore for the perception of worth. I collect it for a personal perception of worth.
That's right.
And, there's books that I've collected now that I'm a reader. I enjoy the whole experience of the worlds that the creators involved take me to, which is why, a book like Fracture I love talking about, because it's such a world that you get drawn into. When Jim was mentioning earlier, and I hadn't thought of this myself, the supporting cast that's in this book is so integral to moving Jeff forward. Because as Jeff changes, or as we learn more about what's going on with Jeff, there are people that start to appear in Jeff's life that become very critical. And they're very rich and well developed. So they're characters that I would love to read more about in the future if the opportunity ever presented itself. And
well, that's a great idea. We haven't talked about a spinoff. I'll have to talk to Sean about a spinoff.
And whether those happen or not, I would read it in an instant. So I'm saying that from a standpoint of when he was saying, I was nodding when he was saying that. But I think that says a lot for a book when you care not just about the main character, but you care about the supporting cast. I think it's essential in great comic storytelling. If you don't sell us on the supporting cast as well, the book is very flat.
Well, that was one of the fun parts for me about Volume 2 of Fracture, because we do get to, with a 4-issue rather than a 3-issue, we do have some more room to see some development from the side characters and add some new side characters. There's a character called Dr. Atomic who becomes involved with Jeff and with Virtue's wife, Sandy is her name, and he's it's not explicitly spelled out, but this is a former supervillain who has been forcibly reformed, and he becomes involved. And we see some development within the Society of the Thorns as to what happens when some folks step up and try to fill the void left by Malice after he suffers the fate that he suffers in Volume 1. Malice was the so-called second in command of this Society of Thorns. So his departure creates a vacuum that others attempt to fill that, again, has implications for Jeff. And we see a little bit more of the villains. We see some new villains. So that cast of supporting characters expands in Volume 2. So I got the fun of some more costume designs and some more side characters. And we get to see a little bit more into the Sandy character's life. She is a nurse, and we have some scenes that take place in her workplace, and we get to see her interacting with some of her coworkers in Volume 2 as well.
I'd ask our listeners if you've never picked up Fracture before, or if you have picked up Fracture before, we'd love for you to call into the show on our voicemail line and let us know your thoughts, or post in our Facebook group, because I think it's a really cool book, and I'd love people to try it. And the entry point is so easy that,
Yes.
I honestly, like you said, I know you said the first issue you can get it for free, but to me, a $1.99 price point to get a complete miniseries. I'm a big fan. When a miniseries is out, I really feel like it behooves you to read the whole thing. Just because I think a story's developed with a certain intention of a beginning, middle, and ending. Even though there's a cliffhanger at the end, there's still a resolution to a conflict that takes place within that story arc that is pretty essential to read to decide your feelings on the overall story. And Fracture is one of those that I really do feel you're. Having read that experience myself, read all 3 issues together, it was one of those, once I read issue 1, I could not put it down. And to be able to have the opportunity to read it all the way through is, I think, an interesting thing that works out really well with a miniseries. So I would encourage anyone listening, if you haven't read Volume 1, to do that. I guarantee you will pick up Volume 2. But please let us know about that experience, because I think that's a great way for other people who maybe aren't sure whether or not they should try it to kind of say, oh, wait, a lot of people are jumping on board and saying they really like this project, so you should. Where can they find out more information about Action Lab and your projects?
Action Lab, all the books are highlighted at actionlabcomics.com or the Action Lab Facebook page. Just search for Action Lab on Facebook, and the Action Lab website is actionlabcomics.com. To find out about me personally and my artwork, you can find me on Facebook, Chad Ciccone, and on Facebook, Cicconi. I do post a lot of, I've been doing a lot of sketch work to try to hone my skills on anatomy and things, and I post a lot of that stuff up on Facebook. I also have a DeviantArt page. You can just search on my name and find it. I do have an art blog, chadciccone.com, where I post up a lot of stuff as well, and there's a lot of links there to other places where you can find my art, the Baby Boomer stuff and the Action Lab stuff and the Fracture stuff. So Facebook, Twitter, it's all just my name, Chad Ciccone, and Action Lab Facebook, and Action Lab on Twitter. Action Lab Danger has a Twitter and a Facebook site as well, or the main site, actionlabcomics.com.
I'll actually
or check the Diamond Previews catalog.
And I'll put a link to all that in our show notes. So if you're listening to this, you don't need to write all that down. You can get it right from our show notes or from our show website, which always has the show notes of the episode as well. But
when is this going out? We're actually having a Fracture signing event on Saturday. Will this go out before then?
It was going to be our Christmas episode, but I actually could bump it up before then.
We have a signing event at New Dimension Comics near Monroeville, Pennsylvania. It's just search New Dimension Comics on the web. We had a signing event at Phantom of the Attic last Saturday. And I was going to ask you, are you guys going to there's a convention in May in Cleveland called the Cleveland Pop Con?
I didn't even know about that.
Yeah, it's a new convention they're starting this year. Let me see if I can find it.
Yeah, my answer would be yes.
And they reached out to Action Lab, and we're going to be partnering with them, and we're going to have a big presence there with Action Lab. It's May 16th through the 18th. They have I just found their Facebook page, Cleveland Pop Expo, May 16th to 18th, and I'm going to be there kind of leading the charge with the Action Lab contingent. We're going to have an island there, and we're probably going to have 5-6 different Action Lab creators there set up doing sketches and signings of all the books. I think we're going to be doing some panels there. We haven't arranged all the final details yet. The one person we have signed up right now who we're sure of is Carl Yonder, who is the artist of the Action Lab book Pirate Eye.
I love that book.
It's a pretty amazing book. It's another one of these ideas that's like, did nobody think of this before? Uh-huh. It's a merger of the pirate and noir genres. Mm-hmm. And they're doing their books in a series of one-shots. So I think they're on their 4th or 5th one-shot. And I think we're about to see the first collected Pirate Eye edition. I think they do like 30-something page one-shots. Mm-hmm. And Carl is the artist for that. And he's going to be with us at the Cleveland Pop Expo, May 16th through 18th. We're going to be at a lot of shows in the upcoming year. A lot of Action Lab creators are going to be out at stores on Free Comic Book Day. We have the benefit of, because we're sort of spread over the country and a diverse group, we can cover a lot of different shows. We have Dave Dwanch out on the West Coast, and Jason Martin, who we brought on board to head up the Danger Zone line, is also on the West Coast. Kevin Freeman, our president, is down in North Carolina. Jamal Eigel is now on board with us. He's up in New York. Kelly Dale, another one of our marketing directors, is down in Atlanta. Me and Sean Gabrin and a couple other folks are here in the middle of the country, so we can blanket a lot of different shows without incurring a lot of costs, because we have people local to a lot of the different shows. So Cleveland's in my region, so I'm going to be heading up to you guys' neck of the woods in May.
I'm glad you said something, because it's been a while since we've had a con in Cleveland. Like something that's a substantial con in Cleveland.
Well, I didn't talk to them directly, but these guys reached out to us and sort of asked if we would come, and they're working with us in getting us some space. And I think this is the first year they're doing it. I think these pop expos have some shows in other cities, and they're trying to expand into Cleveland. So we don't quite know what to expect in terms of the crowd and what they're going to have to set up, but it's close enough for me here in Pittsburgh that it's not a big expense to get there. Don't have to fly or anything. So we're going to give this show a shot, and hopefully they make something good. A guy started a show here in Morgantown, West Virginia, which is very near to me. I'm actually south of Pittsburgh, so Morgantown is probably closer to me than the Monroeville show that they do up in Pittsburgh. And it was the attendance wasn't huge at that show, West Virginia PopCon, I think it's called, but the crowd there was amazing. Everybody that walked up to the table was buying stuff. So although the attendance was not as great as a lot of other shows we went to, the West Virginia show we did very well at this year. So we're still feeling our way in terms of which shows Action Lab's going to have a big presence at. But I did want to mention, since you guys are based in Cleveland, that I personally am going to be at this Cleveland Pop Expo. I'd love to see you guys. Maybe we can go out to dinner or something when I'm up there.
I would love that. That would be fantastic.
Oh,
Let's definitely coordinate. Actually, you know what? If you'd be up for it, we'd love to have you back on after the second series of Fractures over, and maybe we could talk a little bit more in depth about Volume 2.
Yeah, we can do a spoiler episode and talk about Volume 2 like we talked about Volume 1 after it comes out.
Yeah, I'd love to do that. So if you're up for it, I'd love to do that.
Absolutely, I'd be thrilled to. And the timing is, like I said, issue 1 was supposed to be coming out in December, but it got pushed back to January, and I think that's going to push the other issues slightly, just by a week or two each. So I think issue 2 is going to be coming out late January, early February. Issue 3 is going to be late February, early March. And that again has the Super Ugly variant and the Bill Blankenship variant. And issue 4 should be in March, or now maybe pushed back to the beginning of April. And then obviously we're going to be doing a collected volume. The good news for me on this one is the collected volume of Volume 2 is going to be full size.
Nice.
During our first year or two of operation, we had done some of our trades in a digest size, and the Fracture Volume 1 trade, the print version, is in the digest size. And it's great. It's great to get it more cheaply, and it's a nice compact presentation, but I like to see my art to full size. So I'm happy that the Volume 2 trade is going to be coming out at full comic size.
That's awesome. That actually is perfect timing, because it'd be great to be able to revisit. And actually, it's a good way to announce to our listeners that, hey, we are going to be doing a follow-up episode on Volume 2, so please pick it up and then join in the conversation with us. It'll be cool.
Yeah, well, with the timing of this Cleveland show, maybe that show might be, if the timing works out, it could be the premiere show for the trade for Volume 2. I just finished the cover for the trade, the wraparound cover for the trade, just 2 days ago.
That's perfect. That's awesome.
Cool.
All right. Is there anything else you want to shout out?
No, just check out all the Action Lab stuff. We're doing some amazing stuff on the Danger Zone side. I mean, obviously, we've got Molly Danger and Vamplets and Princeless on the Action Lab side to go along with Fracture and a lot of other great books. But I think people are still coming up to speed on the Danger Zone side with M Theory, and a book we brought on from Super Real Graphics called Zombie Tramp, which is exactly what you think it is. But it's an amazing book, and we're getting a lot of interest in that book. And a book that I'm in love with right now, it's called Bo Plushy Gangsta. It's about a gangbanger who gets hit by a voodoo curse that turns him into a teddy bear. But he just keeps right on being a gang leader, gold teeth and the whole 9 yards. And the art in that book is amazing, and you should check that out. I believe there's a guided view on Comixology. We've been working very closely. I should point out, we've been working very closely with Comixology, and we're one of just a few companies that have been working on the Comixology native guided view comics. And I think Vamplets and I think Molly Danger and Bo Plushy Gangsta are part of the guided view line of books that do this whole thing where, you can go, all the books you can do the panel flow in Comixology, just look at them panel to panel, but the guided view ones are not quite motion comics, but they're ones where you'll tap onto the next panel and then the word balloon will appear at the next tap, and then another balloon will appear, and it's a little more cinematic presentation for a book. It's a really interesting way to read the book, and you can turn that on or off if you want to read it the normal way. But we're one of just a handful of companies that has been, obviously Marvel and DC are doing it, but other than that, there's a pretty short list of companies that have been working with Comixology on the guided view, and we are lucky enough to be one of them. We're very happy to be partnering with Comixology, and so you can check out the whole Danger Zone line in Comixology, and particularly a couple of those books that are in the native guided view section.
One of the things I really like about the guided view, it adds to me another reread reason.
Sure.
Because there's a different experience reading with the guided view than there is when you get to read them panel by panel. And I like both ways of reading it. It's just another opportunity to read comics in a new way. I like that it takes advantage of, hey, you can do unique things with a digital format that brings a different sort of rereadability to the comics. Right. And I love that. I think it's just a great opportunity. There
is some time and effort required to prepare the books for guided view, and I will tell you, we've just recently brought on a couple of interns to help us do that and keep up with it and try to get on a good solid schedule of one or two Action Lab books coming out every week, but it's not an insubstantial amount of work. I think that might be why you're not seeing the guided view section explode as fast as a lot of the other parts of Comixology. But I'm with you. I love holding a print comic book in my hand, and as an artist, it's still one of the highlight days of my life when I open a box from our printer and see one of my comic books that I've done the artwork on in my hand on a piece of paper for the first time. But digital is here to stay, and for a lot of titles, I do enjoy reading books on Comixology, and it's given me a chance, just because of finances, I'm not going to go buy every book that I might be interested in reading and I don't have the space to store them, and for a whole number of reasons, there are some titles that I read on Comixology and I enjoy. I think it's a pretty good reading experience. It's not quite the same experience as holding a paper comic book in your hand, but it's certainly not bad. And I've read a lot of stuff on Comixology that I would never have picked up in the store.
Well, my hope with Comixology and just the whole concept of digital in general is that eventually there becomes a digital culture that becomes what the newsstand was to comics in the past. I think comics need alternative delivery mediums and an alternative culture that surrounds that medium. Not to spread out the current comic culture between the two mediums, but to develop a new culture to it, because I just think the product that's coming out from comics now across comics, and I mean this Action Labs is a huge part of this, is just really at an all-time high right now. And
I could not agree with that more, and I think one of the things that digital can help do, and as somebody who's drawing a kind of superhero-related comics, maybe I'm a hypocrite for saying this, but I think one of the things that the long-term health of comics is tied to is divorcing the notion of comics from being tied exclusively to superhero comics. We have to propagate the idea that comic books are simply a storytelling medium, and that you can get any kind of stories in a comic book. And I think things like Saga and Lock and Key, Stray Bullets, all that type of thing, getting out there and getting accessible to more people. The people who have tablets vastly outnumber comic book fans, and if Comixology is a hook to get people who have never read comics suddenly thinking that, oh, this is a different way to just read a story on my mobile device, that can't but help the industry as a whole, in my mind.
Absolutely, I 100% agree. Especially if it brings it just a new audience, and that's what we really need in comics, is just a gradual growth of a new audience. And I think that there's ways to reach that through different medium. I want to thank you for coming on and spending all this time with us tonight.
Man, thanks.
I want to thank you for having me on. There's nothing I like doing better than talking about myself, talking about comics, comics in general, and Action Lab. We're striving to, increase our recognition and get our books into more people's hands. So any opportunity I have to evangelize about my book and Action Lab's books, we're thrilled, and I enjoy talking to you guys just on a personal level too. So thank you.
Yeah, I'm glad that we got an opportunity to have you back on, but let's definitely plan to not make it so long next time, and let's definitely do a follow-up with Volume 2. I like the idea of, after it's over, being able to get spoilery with Volume 2 and talk about it, because this book just begs to be discussed.
Yeah, I'd love to, because I'm just about done, but I'm having a lot of fun drawing Volume 2, and I'd love to get to talk about it. And let's definitely touch base and get together when I'm in Cleveland in May.
Perfect. We'll definitely do that.
Hope this craft can withstand this powerful force.
I want to remind everyone about our show voicemail line. It's 1-440-388-4434 or Dr. Norge on Skype. We actually recorded 2 episodes back-to-back, and I flip-flopped the content because of the timeliness of some of Chad's comments. I wanted to make sure to get the word out about his book. Both of those episodes have been recorded. We're going to come back a little bit sooner for our second part of this, which is going to be, we did an in-depth look at Batman 0 Year, number 26, and also a number of the tie-ins that went along with it. Jim's on vacation, so we delayed the release of these episodes to record a couple back-to-back, and it was great to have the opportunity to talk with Chad. I always enjoy talking with comic creators and getting into the behind-the-scenes on what that process is like, because that's not something that I'm a part of. I'm the fan that gets to enjoy it, so I hope you enjoyed this recording with Chad as much as I did recording it with Jim. So please feel free to call in with your comments on Fracture if you've read it, comments on Batman 0 Year, or anything that's going on in comics that you'd like to discuss right now. We'd love to have that as part of the next episode. That will be up before Christmas, so we'll have that episode coming next week as well. So we got some content coming your way. We will have 4 December episodes. We were slightly delayed because of trying to get a couple back-to-back recordings together, but that was only to meet those needs so we could make up 4 shows. Our 4th episode will be a 4 Forever Evil show with the issues that are going to be released right around Christmas as well. So we have some great content coming your way. And thank you very much for joining us on that. I'll also remind everyone about our show website, which is ragingbullets.com. That's the place to go to get rough outlines on where the podcast is going. I update regularly on what release schedules look like. And that way, I really believe that it's important with your audience to communicate as far as, hey, this is when we're going to be releasing. This is what we're thinking about doing for episodes. Just so you know, it's coming your way. You guys are incredibly important to us, and we want to make sure that you have that content. I also always post the show notes. You can listen to episodes from there. It's linked to our Twitter account. We have a wonderful Raging Bullets Facebook group community, which goes so far beyond the content of the show, and I just want to shout that out and the wonderful people that are there, because it's just a place that I love to go and be a part of as well. So, and we're also on Google+, so there's lots of ways to connect with the show and its content. So thank you for however you do that. I also want to just quickly shout out the importance. We talked on this episode about the comic book community. I would extend that to the comic book podcasting community. It's really important nowadays with books like Fracture, with shows like ours, with everything that's going on out there, for people to get viral. We don't have a marketing budget for our podcast. We rely heavily on you guys getting the word out, and we are so lucky with the community audience that we have. I would also encourage the same thing with books like Fracture and Action Labs. You know, if you pick up Fracture and you enjoy it, let people know about it. Get the word out about this book. Let's get some numbers up on it. I just think it's just a great way with the community to help support this industry that we all know and love. That's what, to me, the comic book community is all about nowadays. And I love that we feel like we're a part of that community. And the Cleveland convention that Chad mentioned, Jim and I will both definitely be there. So if you're going to be in the area and hitting there, let us know. I love that we found out on this episode there's going to be another Cleveland convention. And as it gets closer, we'll announce more details on the show, because I definitely would love to go there and be a part of it and just hang out. I think it's going to be a great event. Once again, sponsoring this episode is DCBService.com and InStockTrades.com. Over at DCBService.com, make sure to pick up Fracture, issue number 3 of 4. It's $2.99 regularly, 30% off, only $2.09. We mentioned the Pirate Eye trade paperback. That's $9.99 regularly, 45% off, only $5.49. If you do a search on there for Action Labs in the publisher section, you'll see wonderful. Action Lab Entertainment has a wonderful lineup of books that are out there. Jack Hammer, Princeless, Skyward, just some of the books that they have on there as well. So check out Action Lab Entertainment over on DCBService.com. Over at InStockTrades.com, you can also do a search for Action Lab Trades. Trade paperbacks are a great way, if you haven't had a chance to try out their product before, to get a complete story and to see if the stories are right for you. There's just a wonderful lineup, including Fracture Volume 1, that's available on InStockTrades.com. Remember, with InStockTrades.com, orders of $50 or more give you free shipping. So if there's a lot of comics that you've been looking for and you want to save more money, make sure to bundle them up and do free shipping. Jim, our next episode, we are going to be talking Batman 0 Year. We're going to talk about Batman and some of the tie-in issues. Batman issue number 26 will be the focal point, and some of the tie-in issues. I'm really excited to talk about that. So we will see everyone then.
Bye.
Flying through space and time, 1,000 different lifetimes. Faded for love and flaws and incredibly clear sightlines. Swinging your mace around, such a practical outlook. Helping the JSA and occasionally supporting your own book. Hawkman, Hawkman. Eagle eyes can't see, Hawkman, your plan. Me, Hawkman. The villains are closing in, be they Thanin Guard or Egyptian. Working so hard to thwart you and Hawkgirl's mission. The odds are not on your side, and danger seems to stack up.